We are here talking about all things women's football here in Canada. We have Woso North here with the program, her very first time, which means by a contract, she'll be here like another 12 times over the next 2 years because this is how we operate here, apparently. But welcome to the Africans, where we talk primarily African and Canadian football because we couldn't be the Africans if we didn't do both. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Hit the like on this video. If you haven't subscribed to Woso North, I don't know what you're doing. Video essays, well done. She's very refined. It makes me feel as if I just talk on these, and she's just there like, well, if you look at this research here, if you look at all the videos and you look at where players come from, you could come to these conclusions. She speaks like an essay. I speak like I have ADHD. But we are here and we have fun. Abby, welcome to the program, first of all. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me. I don't even actually know your government name. I just know you as Africans. See?
Oh, government. You know what? That's actually a thing that I've realized. I've never told anyone my actual name because it's more fun that way. No, but my actual name is Akwesi. So
Equesti. Okay.
I am as Ghanaian named
Yeah,
as
a
Ghanaian could
true
be.
Ghanaian name.
The only thing more is I could be a Kwame or a Kwaku at this point. Then it would be like, okay, well, that's fine. But yeah, so we're here to talk about all things, and I forgot about the 1 minute intro, so we're doing the 1 minute intro here. But all things football. I love your channel. Firstly, before we get into just topics here, tell me a little about your YouTube channel and your experience with, say, soccer or football in this country of Canada, and how you got into starting to create content like you did.
Yeah. So I played soccer when I was younger as a kid. Started off for fun, like all kids do. Eventually went competitive. And so was playing at the youth competitive level. And I
Mhm.
basically stopped around university,
Okay.
which many people do, and many girls do in particular. But I've always just been obsessed with soccer, with football, but mainly with men's mostly because I couldn't really even find the content for women's
Mm.
football here in Canada, or it existed and I wasn't aware of it. And so it's been more in recent years where I've become way more into and obsessed and invested in women's soccer, women's football. And so the timing with the Northern Super League coming in Canada is
Mm.
perfect. But yeah, I think like last year I decided to just make a YouTube channel where I could just talk about anything that I wanted to talk about related to women's soccer. I have particular interests, like particular teams I'm interested in, but I have
Okay.
there's so many topics that are really interesting, and so I made my channel a bit more general, and I just post whatever. But yeah, no, that's sort of how I came to be with this channel.
Okay, that's not bad. You said you have some teams that you follow. What are your overall teams that you're following right now? Because for me, I don't have necessarily a team for women's football. I tend to be more, are there Canadians on the team? Cool, I'll follow them. Are
Yeah.
there Africans on the team? Cool, I'll follow them. Are there Ghanaians on the team? Oh, well, I mean, you have my money now. So who are you rooting for, and how is your team doing so far this year?
Okay, so I'm a Chelsea fan. I think that a lot of Ghanaians, Michael Essien, he joined the
True.
team. The parents all were like, okay, you gotta support Chelsea. So now that's how I'm a Chelsea fan. Again, it started with the men, but now I'm mainly focused on the Chelsea women.
Okay.
And then in terms of what you said, that's how I operate for the NWSL, sort of just like, yeah, who has the African players? Like, so that's why I was really into Kansas City with Chewinga and really into Orlando with Banda. And I know there's Princess, but yeah, there's also there's also Princess too with BFC. But Orlando and KC were like the top teams. So
Mm.
I operate similarly, but here in Canada, of course, I'm going to be going for AFC.
Okay, okay. I
So
see you. I
that
mean,
would be my
geographically, they are the closest side to me. So I guess by proxy, I'm an AFC Toronto fan, supporter. As I always say, whenever I'm down in Niagara, so whenever we have a team that crosses the Burlington Bridge, I will be there. Okay, I will. Whichever league wants to put a team. I don't like highway traffic. So give me a team I
That's
don't have to sit on the highway for. I am there. And we are there and supporting. But you mentioned AFC Toronto, which is fascinating. The NSL is long overdue, I think, in this country in terms of having a league for women. And there's so many levels of excitement. There's so many questions and curiosities with it as well. But from your perspective, when you look at the league, what does this mean for players like such as yourself? If you could somehow freeze your 12-year-old self and fast forward it into this era, would you, as that soccer player, be looking and saying, you know what? Maybe it's not Europe, maybe it's not there, but maybe I can get to Toronto, and wherever I go from here, I can go there. As a young female soccer player, football player here in Canada, what does this league mean to you?
Oh, I think it's huge. It's massive. I've actually had that thought of like, if I was just a little bit younger when the NSL was coming through, like I would have been an incredible opportunity. I think like I made a video on my channel where I was talking about like why girls stop playing sports. And that
Yes.
was a big thing that there's a huge drop off in the teen years, but then in particular at age 18. And I think a lot of it, and I think it will change now that we have the NSL, but I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that if you're first of all, the development was different. And so the way in which you can improve was harder, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
Canada than, for example, in England, in Europe, where they have these academy systems. And so already by the time you get to 18, if you're not quite good enough to maybe make like a D1 team,
Yeah.
or you're not sure, you don't want to go to Europe and play for like, you just stop. And I think now with the NSL, there's this opportunity to continue, like a legitimate opportunity to continue. And I think and I hope that there will also be maybe in the future some sort of academy system that gets built in.
Yes.
I know it's a future thing, but if that can happen with our NSL teams where you have the youth who can go straight in, like how TFC has their own like academy,
Yeah.
Toronto FC, have that with the NSL. I think this is massive for the growth of soccer in Canada, which is already really popular for the
It
women's side, at
it
least.
certainly is. Like it certainly is. You look at the women's national team success at the Olympics. I mean, there's also the drone thing, which it happened, guys. I
Yeah,
acknowledge it happened. It happened.
yeah,
Um, I do, and it's just like I don't have. I just there's so many emotions about that, but we'll leave that for another day because I'm tired of talking about it. But it happened, and we must take a messing with it. But I think, like you said, the potential thing, the one thing I always look at with leagues, and I've had the same criticism or the same thought with, say, like the CPL on the men's side, get me to a point where you give these players pathways, right? And what the NSL is another pathway opportunity for players that it's not that, hey, I have to go somewhere else to develop. Maybe it's here. I think having players like say like the Stewart twins who are out with Calgary
Mhm.
Wild who were gonna go to Germany, but decide they're gonna stay here. That's the type of player you look at and say, okay, this is interesting. In the same way that you look at a former youth national team nominee for Player of the Year, like a Nicola Small, who finishes up at Wake Forest, and now she's at your AFC Toronto there, which I'm waiting to get my small kit. So whenever those kits go for sale, I'm going to get them. It's pathways for me. And it's the same thing I saw the men. Give them different options that they can use. And maybe they're not all going to be top 5 leaguers, but give them the opportunity to pursue their dream, pursue their passion. Because if they don't make that levels that they want to, at least you're giving them that environment. And in doing so, now you have more people that you can throw back into your ecosystem who have played at a level and can now prepare. I think it's great for the women's side. I do find though when you look at like say the women's side, it opens some doors for them. I still think in terms of soccer development, we have a lot to work on in Canada and continue to grow. Access is one of those things for me that I feel that I mean we're both. I'm going to make an assumption. Immigrant parents.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yes. So, yes. Okay. So cool. Immigrant parents too. So like for me, like the idea of following and continue on in sports was like my parents were like, cool, recreational, recreational, recreational. Once you hit like mid high school, it's like, will you be professional? No. Okay. Good. Science,
yeah,
books,
yes, yeah,
and And so you see that, and it's like, can we give some players those opportunities where maybe instead of leaving the sport as early as they do, maybe holding on for another year or two gets them to a point where it's a scholarship down in the States. Maybe it's playing collegiate up here or in the university system here. Maybe it's getting a contract to play NSL here. But opening the doorways there, when you look at the landscape that you grew up playing in, and then you look at the landscape that is now being built, what are some of the things that you're excited about? But then also, what are some of the things that you feel still could be improved?
Well, I will say the system is a lot different now, and so
Mhm.
it's already better, even pre this NSL. Like the fact that League One was created is
Yeah.
already a step up from what I was playing in, and so there have been like incremental
Mm.
improvements in terms of not just getting yourself into the system, but then getting yourself recognized. I think was really hard. And I think in the past, a lot of it was like connection based, like who do you know?
Yeah.
So you can get a chance to try out, I think it's a little bit more structured now. And I would like to think it's a little bit more fair. But with that said, Canada is just so huge. And to
Yeah.
your point about access, there are still going to be people who fall through the cracks, especially from like a diversity cultural perspective. Like you mentioned, the immigrant parents. I know in England, that's also a topic that gets mentioned a lot,
Yeah.
particularly for like the South Asian community, which is quite large
Yeah.
in England. And culturally, girls in sports, it's not as encouraged. And so there's that issue of trying to, and I think this similar exists in Canada. And so I think that while they've sort of created the infrastructure to better recognize talent,
Mm.
there are still going to be people who probably need a little bit more work, a little bit more outreach, focused outreach to target certain communities to make sure they can get into that system. So yeah, I think like pros in terms of the work has been done and it's gotten better, but yeah, I don't think we can stop at this.
Yeah.
I think it still needs to get better.
No doubt. This is like, it's a moment to celebrate, no doubt, but it's by no means the finish line, right? It's a check
Mhm.
mark where we have to continue to develop and kind of go. You mentioned like the ideas of like representation and such. I wonder, how do I ask this question? We're just gonna ask it. Um, we look at like our national teams, for example. I have a lot of Honduran and like El Salvadorian friends down here, so they always make the joke with me where like your team, your men's team, they look like you now. I'm like, what are you saying there? What are you just no, let's have this conversation. Let's talk. Um, and so like I know Crystal Dunn has the interview she did where it's when she was playing in England. Young players come up there and say, "Hey, you look like me. I feel like I can continue to press on in that because I see people who are like me who can continue on." Do you think, for me, I think I know the answer to that question, but do you think that we have done a good enough job of giving those platforms to those players, not necessarily as a token space, but more so of, have we been able to open up for opportunities for players of all that diversity in Canada, or is that still again another checkpoint for us that we have to continue to grow on and continue to get better on?
In Canada specifically, you're
Yeah.
talking about Canada soccer or like the women's team? Because I do think the men's team is obviously a lot more diverse,
Mhm.
just more black. Like let's say diverse, but really there's just more there
What?
are more black players on the
Never.
Canadian men's team. Um, Although I will say that it's changed now, but I
Mhm.
actually felt I used to always feel a little bit of pride with the women's team, always
Mhm.
having more like black players, the
Ye-
Canadian ones than the US. Like the US women's team used to be very white.
yes.
And it's only been in like the past few years with like Mal Swanson, Sophia Smith, Trinity Rodman, Naomi Girma, like all of these players that started coming in. It used to just be like Crystal Dunn,
Yeah.
like Shannon Box, like way back. Like it was so limited. And so I
The
did
Brianna
always
Scurries of
like
the world.
that
Yeah.
about Canada. But in terms of I don't I find that to be a tricky question because
Yeah.
yeah, I just think like it depends on I don't know. I think it's a difficult question because for some people in terms of like when you say platform, I think like putting them in the spotlight. I think
Yeah,
Keisha Buchanan has something right now related to Black History Month that's posted, and like that's what I
yeah,
think of a platform. But there are some people who is just enough to just see the player on the team.
true.
Like that person doesn't need to be a spokesperson for like all of Black people. As
Mhm.
long as they see that there's diverse representation on the team, that could be enough for them to keep playing. And so I
No,
guess it
that's
kind of
true.
depends.
It does.
Where do
And
you,
I
I don't
think
know, where do you feel?
it's a tough one, and like I don't know if I picked the right wording to ask the question how I did, but I'm gonna go with the question I asked. I think you have to be able to see yourself in everything. And I think they've gotten better. I think there's many ways. I mean, the first Canadian football player that I saw, and I was like, I like you, was Charmaine Hooper, right?
Yeah, I knew you
Charmaine
were going
Hooper, like, but like this is like nine. I've said the story, like I feel like I said it my first few podcasts, but it's true. It's summer of '99. I'm in Ghana, with the family, and they're like, we're gonna Women's World Cup is on. I'm like, okay, let's watch this. And then I'm like, Canada. I'm like, we have one of those. Okay, this is a super gal. I like her. This is so like she's my introduction to anything Canadian footy for me, right? And so
Yeah.
for me, I watch her. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Now, as the years go on, right? Yes, you see the players who have come through, and not to say that it's necessarily one thing or the other. I think you could. There's an argument that you can make that over the last maybe 5 years, their best player on the pitch or one of their best players has been Ashley Lawrence. But you don't necessarily always hear that. You don't necessarily
Mhm.
hear or get the same applause that you get. And that's not to say the other players aren't great. The other players are great at what they do. Vanessa Gilles is one of the best center backs in the world. Kadisha Buchanan, when healthy, also one of the best center backs in the world. Oh, by the way, Jade Rose just kind of showed up and was like, "Hi, Sam Kerr. I'm just gonna, dust this up a bit, and then we'll." There
Yeah.
are players there. I think it's fun from a POC standpoint, when you look at the youth teams that are coming up, you're like, okay, yes, we just saw Ella Ati get her first cap yesterday in the Pintar Cup, but then you see the likes of an Olivia Smith and Amanda Allen. I think those two are more significant now than say others because they looked at the collegiate level and they left early. Amanda Allen spent 2 weeks in college. Was like Orlando, Heat, Syracuse. Nah, give me the sun. I'm out. Right. Olivia Smith had 1 year in Penn State and then she went over to Portugal, 1 year there,
Sporting, yeah.
right? And then she's at Liverpool. And it's like you see that path. And now Geneva Hernandez Gray is like, and Sporting is
Yep.
like, if you could be like Olivia, come, come to. I
Yeah.
think they're blazing their own paths in a space where they didn't need to be trailblazers because other players had blazed a trail before. And now you look at them and you say, okay, you are now just standard. You're now options. You look at them and saying, okay, you don't need to go 4 years in college to be a professional. If you're good enough, you can bet on yourself. There are talented players who are watching you. They also did benefit from, again, which is one of the problems with some scouting, which is tournament scouting. They were seen at U17s and they're like, okay, that one, those are good. Bring them over to the academies and they're good. So I think platform may not have been the right word, but I think you see them and you appreciate what the paths that they are now taking. And I think as young players, now maybe it's a conversation of access from a younger age and keeping them in, because again, within Canada, there's the issues within club financing. There's the the very famous words of it's a pay to play system type of a thing. Even looking at the tiers, you can just play football or you can play in the competitive leagues, and those leagues will get you scouted more. It's like, well, if you're good, you're good. Find you, but it's not always the case like that. So to re-ramble and get back to the beginning there, I think we've put our players in a position, regardless of who they are, regardless of race, in a space where, as Canadian footballers, they can now pave their own ways, and players coming up can look at them and say, I can follow into those steps because I've seen you do it before. right? There will be another 7 Olivia Smiths coming because Olivia Smith was the first one to do it, right? Just in the same way that we look at like the Chuku twins, and it's like, yeah, Annabelle is gonna be something great, but we've seen her do it, and someone's gonna say, in another 5 years, we're gonna have another person saying they're coming through. So I think they are in a position where they can continue to break grounds and break new levels. Is it where it could be? No. I think the problem is, again, we've seen a heavy transition with the US, and because they're so close to us, that's what we always compare ourselves to. And the US, again, like you said, they went from barely any to just like, okay, we have Crystal Dunn is still here. Olivia Smith is here. Trinity Rodman is doing her thing. Jaden Shaw's still here. There's still another 12 Thompson sisters, I think. Every time I look, there's a new Thompson sister. So I think when we compare ourselves to them, not to say that we shouldn't, but I think our players are going to have to break and make their own paths because we don't have, say, the system, we don't have the infrastructure, which is, I think, the biggest thing. Talking to like different small clubs, it's always infrastructure for them, right? Getting pitches, getting time on those, that matters. And these are like your small clubs where they're like, yeah, we are a club who are just in Toronto. We're just dealing with kids who just landed. It's just immigrant kids club. It's like, get us a place where we can play. So I think they can, and they're going to continue to, but yes, you'd always love to see more. And I don't think it's a terrible idea to continue to put that emphasis on that, because the more you see those players, the more you keep that creativity and that possibility alive for them moving forward. You are wearing.
Let me ask you something. Can I ask you?
Go on.
So what do you think? And I know this is jumping around, but it is related somewhat to what you were saying about Olivia Smith and Geneva Hernandez-Gray, and this idea of basically foregoing college and going straight to pro. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering what you think about the NSL, because I know the NWSL has now abolished basically the draft, and that's why this offseason we've just seen signings. How do you feel about the NSL as a new league choosing not to have a draft? And do you think there's a potential for players to get missed because now teams have to do the work themselves? They don't have, like, the draft helps teams.
It does.
Made it easier on teams. Yeah.
It does. There's no doubt that the component of a draft helps. Now, it's a very North American thing for us. Now, and the reason why it's in the players will get missed because we don't have a robust system. We always compare things to that male European standard, which is, okay, Chelsea has an academy. The academy has a U23 team, a U21 team, a U17 team, a U15 team, right? And in Canada, we have the team. Like, that's it. Like, there's nothing in between. So there's going to be a reality where the league is perfect for what it's trying to do. The NSL is. I think it could do better, no doubt. I think you are going to have players who fall through the cracks. There's no doubt. Because I think how we are currently set up, you're relying on the interesting thing that I've liked, though, is that a lot of university coaches are getting jobs in the NSL right now, right? Brock's coach just went up. A couple other ones went up. Collar was with the Vancouver Rise Elite. Mm-hmm. Now she's with the Rise proper. And so you have those eyes, but the problem with those eyes is those eyes are still kind of built within where they are. So they may know the landscape a little bit better, but you still only recruited where you were. You're going to need you're going to need a team or an organization who are intentional in trying to find specific players, right? Just like you'd need an intentional team to say, hey, maybe it's AFC Toronto that says, hey, we're just going to go to an untapped market. I think we are going to still have that just because our systems are still very much, we were missing players even as we were built here in Canada with, like, I always had this joke with W Soccer, which is just like, if you're not in an NDC, you don't exist for the national team, right? Like,
I think about Vanessa Gill, Chloe Lacasse. Their stories is like Evelyn Vienne. Yeah,
and like that's the point. So if you can break that off and have teams now trying to build that, I think that helps. It certainly does help. You need the academy aspect. You really do need the academies. because you need them. And like, that's the thing, right? I always say this with the CPL. I think the CPL will be a great league to me when it is seen as a viable alternative to going to an MLS academy and spending years there versus that. And like, you've seen, like, some of their biggest transfers are kids who left MLS academies, went to the CPL, played 1-2 years, and then they got moves. Now we'll see how they develop. That's on them. And I think for the NSL, that's going to be the situation as well. But they aren't fighting against necessarily academies. They're fighting against the system that was, which is collegiate sports, right? And so you are going to have teams and you're going to have players who fall through the cracks. But I do think they're going to have to be intentional to find them. Because if they don't, then it'll just be like, okay. Like, one of the things I thought the NSL would do, and to an extent they did, I figured NSL teams would just raid every NDC, right? I just figured, like, you're looking for young talent, go to Vancouver Elites, bring them up. Now, the funny thing with Vancouver is it feels like everyone just was just, yeah, we'll go to other teams, not Vancouver. So, like,
Yeah.
that's curious to me.
Hunter, yeah.
Right? And then so that didn't happen. And then I figured, okay, I had this conversation with W Soccer, and it was just like, okay, I wonder if a team will say, hey, we're just going to try to recruit and find a market inefficiency, say, like, and I always bring up Africa because, you know, the name. I'm like, could they go to Africa and be like, hey, Ghana, can we get, like, are there players there that we can get on the efficiency and be like, this can be your launching pad to wherever you want to go, type of a thing. You come here, get your feet sorted, have a great year, you'll have more eyes, go. I wonder if they start to build some of those partnerships with academies, whether they are in their community, which I think would be very key. I think most of the teams in Canada are attached to some sort of a club, a bigger one. AFC Toronto is the Nitros. Foothills is Calgary. The Elite is Vancouver. And unofficially, but like, I don't know, they're not fully. No, the Roses aren't with CF Montreal
or the CF.
No, yeah. But like, there's enough connections where you say, okay, these academies now become the hub. So are they able now to recruit properly? Can they bring it in? I think players will still go through the cracks right now because you're dealing with an infrastructure that recruits what it knows. And so if they only know to look in certain spaces, they're only going to know there and only going to go there, right? So I think you're still going to have a few players. And it's the same thing with like national team, right? Players will fall through the cracks because basically we recruited through NDCs. If you can get to the NDC, great. If you couldn't, okay, we're sorry. And then you find out, like, okay, we got 4 players representing Portugal, 3 with the Philippines, and I reach. That's a thing.
But is that a good enough? Is that a good enough excuse at this point? I know money is always comes down to funding and money, and like, can you pay the people properly to properly scout? And we see it with, I know it's got brought up with Arsenal women and this scouting, and I think even Mark Skinner for Manchester United has also brought it up that the scouting. A lot of times for most of these women's teams fall to the coaches and the coaches have another job. The coach has a job of just being the coach, of being the manager. And if they also have to be scouting all around the world, how realistic is that? And so that's why you end up these situations like Jonas Eidebel, who was heavily recruiting from Sweden, either with Swedish players or it was like Australians who were playing in Sweden. But I feel like at some point, but then I look at like Chelsea, for example, who has done a much better job. And I feel like I get it. I get there are going to be areas that you're most familiar with in terms of talent, but like, do better then. Like, educate yourself better, be open to exploring other areas around the world. I think the NWSL actually, I think, has done a pretty okay job in that. They went for Banda, they went for Chewinga, they've gone for players who were playing in China. I feel they've done much better than England, for example, in the WSL. And so like, it can be done. it just takes a little bit more. It just takes a little bit more work.
Yeah, and it comes down to what we said earlier. You have to be intentional about it, right? I think you
Yeah.
can't be in a because again, if I think there's a reality where we look at the league, the Northern Super League, and I'm going to choose my words terribly today. Communications major, guys. Great. I think the symptoms of soccer in Canada are going to be represented in the league, right? In terms
Mm.
of who is represented, where they are playing, and the likes, right? And so you have to do a better job to fight that if you think that's a problem. Now, I think that's a problem. You would probably think that's a problem. There are some people who think that's a problem. But then there's a real argument with some people who will say, well, let's get all the Canadians into a league where they can continue to play. I'm like, okay, I'm not saying don't do that. But when we say all the Canadians, are we talking about all the Canadians? Or are we talking about a specific type of Canadians? Right. And so for me, it comes down to being intentional. And that's on all levels, right? All levels from your grassroots all the way to your clubs, giving those players the opportunities. But it's, I think it's the one thing that is, I wonder how we would look like as a soccer nation if instead of a franchise E type model of team where it's so not necessarily excluded from the community, but like the romanticization of English of like our European football. It's like you have a team in the community. The kids go to the ad academy. They grow in that academy. We see the young tykes grow up, and then we get them into the team, and then we're all excited. I wonder what we would look like in that type of an environment where we were more invested in it versus consumers consuming it, if that makes sense, right? I wonder what that would do. Not to say that that's the reason why, but it's just an overall question. I wonder if I knew that if I'm supporting my three friends, because I have friends who have kids who've been playing fully all their lives, and I'm wondering how the community would react if they knew we're investing into them. Yes, we're going out to support them as we always do, but I wonder what that would look like if instead of a team that is far away that you have to send them, that it's okay, there's a team that they can play with. Maybe they go somewhere else, they follow them. But I don't know if there's necessarily the way that we've always done it. It's just, I don't know. I don't know, Abby. I don't know. I'm just asking questions all over the place now.
Yeah, it is like a culture thing though, like
Yeah.
because you're right. Like I feel like if I understand what you're saying, it's like with Europe, like how you said, there's like your local team,
Hmm.
but there's like multiple levels to your like local team, and so people
Yeah.
can grow up within that community. And yeah, if they end up moving, they move. But then you see how much it like impacts people, especially in the men's game. Like when Mason Mount left Chelsea, like people were so upset because they saw
Hmm.
him as a kid grow up to be part of the men's senior team, and like, yeah, we don't really have that.
Hmm.
We don't have that at all here.
No.
And I think like, and I know, I feel like part of me, because it also doesn't kind of really exist in the US either, like with the
Hmm.
women's soccer. And I feel like Canada, because of proximity, like you said, we just copy a lot of things that
Hmm.
happen in the US for better or for worse. So I think like the US has the advantage of like the NWSL has existed for so long. They've established themselves. Even before the NWSL, they had other leagues. And so
Yeah.
they have years on us in terms of like setting up the system for professional women's soccer in the
Hmm.
US that Canada doesn't have. And so for sure there are things we need to look at from the US. But I feel like there are other certain things like traditions wise that I kind
Hmm.
of wish we weren't copying them.
Yeah. No,
And I do
that's
feel like
fair.
it would be great. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
No, you go. You go. I was just like, no, what you're
No,
saying is true.
yeah, no, I don't know. But I also just feel like, the league is new. And so I'm also, I feel like it'll grow. I think like, I'm trying to temper my expectations basically. Like, I think for a first year inaugural season, there are going to be bumps.
Hmm.
Even just with the signing, like the idea of going to different markets around the world to try and recruit from. Like
Yeah.
I could see that. I can see that happening. We're seeing it in the women's game with like Bayern Munich having a partnership with Tigres Femenil.
Yeah,
And there are like other, like Wolfsburg has a partnership with the Chicago Stars
yeah.
FC. And so like I think it'll happen around the world, and I think eventually it'll happen in Canada too, but then it's like it's kind of like baby steps. Like you got to start small, start with what we're going to start this year and then grow to
Mhm.
that.
No, and I think that's where like I'm stuck between like the league hasn't kicked off yet. So like there's a part of me where I'm like I want to be there's a part of me that feels like I need to be critical, but the other part is like we haven't even crawled yet. Can we get the crawling first? Like I can have my reservations. I can say them, but I'm not going to come down and be like, well, you haven't done the X, Y, and Z. They just started the league.
Yeah.
So let's get the ball rolling. It's still a concern. Don't get me wrong, it's still a concern, but let you succeed. Let me see you learn how to walk. And then when you learn how to walk, then it's like, okay, you've learned how to walk. Let's now see what we can do in terms of building this now that we can get the things that we think that could really take it to the next level. Because it also comes down to, and Diana Matheson from the get-go has said she wants this league to be a top league in the world. Like, if that's what
Mhm.
we're going for, okay, are we at a place where we can compete? No, we're in our first year. So let's get to year three. Let's get to year three first. I mean, some of the things they've done are things I've been saying that I wish the men's league had done. Like they're on linear television. Good for them. Things like that matter. Getting in front of eyes matter. Even like you look at like the thing that has helped women's sports succeed, in my opinion, is that they've taken advantage of the time frames and the time slots which are accessible. Yes, prime time is great, but you don't need prime time, right? NCAA women's basketball championships, right? It happens there, and it's a high number. It beats the men, I think, last year, and the reason it beats
Yeah.
the men is not just because you have compelling people. It's because the game is at 3 in the afternoon on a Sunday. I got to go to work on a Monday. I don't need to stay. And the men's game is on a Monday night or a Tuesday night. Sir, I have
Yeah.
work in the morning. I don't have time to watch this game. But they look at those inefficiencies in time and say, let's take advantage of them. And I think in Canada, like they're gonna have to do the same things to say, okay, can we take advantage of the time slots that aren't necessarily the prime time slots, but the slots that we can get the most eyes and people's like, okay. I always would joke with my sister. The greatest thing that changed my life was seeing a movie at 11 a.m., leaving the theater and realizing I still have my day.
You still
It's
have the rest of your yeah.
it's like you'll see Avengers at 11 and it's 3 and you're like, I, I can go cut the grass. Let me go
I don't
cut
gotta
this
go to bed.
grass.
I don't gotta go to bed yet. Yeah.
But like, and I think that's what the league has. They've done a good job of that, and we'll have to see them continue to build on that. But let's see them start.
But
Yeah, go.
I will say to that point, I agree. I agree. And I think part of that is I think there's some like data that shows women sports fans, there are a lot of are younger. Like there
Yes.
are older fans, but they're younger. And so it works when you put it at these times because either maybe people are like students, so they have the time to watch it at these times. But I
Mhm.
will say like one of the criticisms that particularly like European football fans have of North American soccer or even of European women's football is the family friendly kids
I knew you were
vibe
going there, and
and like there's not the fierce rivalry and everyone's just laughing and you can't swear, you can't do all of that. And like to your point about the time slots, you do get a different crowd, which
mhm.
changes the atmosphere.
It does. And is that a problem? Because to me, like, look, the last women's national team in Canada game I went to, it was the Canada Mexico game, and I was sitting bleachers end on at BMO, and I was basically in the Mexican fan section, and let me tell you, it was a blast. I had fun, and I'm like, I need this in my life. I need more of this, and it's and I do, and I hear both sides of it. I have some WOSO fans who are like, "Yeah, this is the environment, that's fine," and others are like, "No, we're allowed to hate. Let's not get too feelers, but like, let's be a crowd here. Like, let's be a great, intimidating place to be. Like, where do you find yourself? Where do you fall on that argument of, is WOSO or like women's sports, is it too much on the family friendly side or versus a great competitive theater?
I think that is a hard. I wish I knew this was going to be asked so I could think about it, because I feel like on the one hand, as someone who was like a little girl who liked
Mhm,
soccer, I would have loved to be able to go to an environment and watch games like that, and it felt safe.
mhm.
And I think especially because this sport is growing, I don't think we can afford to be turning away potentially people like that, right?
Fair.
Like I do
Yeah.
think that's an important part of women's football, but I do think that that is such a tough. I don't actually I don't know, because it all just it's just all it all matters on atmosphere for me. And like I
Yeah.
think like if the family friendly vibe becomes a situation where it just feels quiet or dull.
Mm,
Like this has been a criticism. I know I keep using like Europe as examples, but like this has been a criticism for Chelsea's games that have been at Stamford Bridge. Because
yeah.
when the men are at Stamford Bridge, it's a very different atmosphere than when the women are playing there. It tends to just be quieter when the women, you can't really hear any chanting, you can't hear anything. And it's because it's, it's more kids. It's more
Yeah.
kids that are there. And so for me, it's like, yes, I want the environment to be welcoming for kids, but not to the detriment of it feeling like,
A library. Yeah.
yeah, it's not loud. It's not, and that, because that feeds into the players. The players say that, like, they need that. And
Yeah.
so I think there's a balance. I think there's a balance.
It's yes, the very classic middle ground. I think there's a middle ground we could find somewhere in between. We're not asking for hooliganism, we're not asking for that, but we
No,
need that balance between, you can bring your kids, but we'll have like 12 chants. Let's go. And I think even like with in Canada, it's the same thing, men's versus women's games. It's just like one, you'll go in it and it feels sometimes, and by no means, I'm not trying to take shots at any of the supporter groups. I'm not. But like you'll go to some games and it's like the men's side, it's like, okay, there's chants, there's things, everybody seems to know what's going on. The women's side, you go to a women's game, it's like there's a chant. It just feels very much like a different environment. And I feel like it comes down to, again, be intentional. If this is the environment you want, take the steps in and create that. It's not just going to happen. Sometimes it happens organically, good for you, but it's not always going to happen organically. So if that's the environment you want to build, you have to put in the work to do it. And I think that will come with time, and that comes with people who care about it, and that comes with continuing to put in the work for it. We mentioned in the national teams, one of your first shorts was Casey Stoney getting let go from the San Diego Wave, which we now look back and say, did she survive San Diego? I think she survived San Diego. I don't have any issue saying that, Salmon. She survived San Diego. But now we have her with the women's national team here in Canada. And again, I'm not an avid NWSL watcher, but I'll watch again. I watched San Diego because Sheridan was there. So I'm like, yeah, I see you. I see you. So it worked out in that sense. But when you look at her as a coach pairing up with this current team, what's the overall vibe for you, and what do you think is the ceiling for this side? Because I have many hot takes I can give, but I'll wait for you to give us some ceiling talk here.
yeah, I mean, ugh, I think it's tough. Like I can't say I've like heavily researched the type of
Mm-hmm.
coach that Casey
True.
Stoney is, but I know that she is known for her defense.
Mm-hmm.
She's more of like a defensive coach, and so that was my only thought when her name was floated out there, because
Mm-hmm.
Canada has always been known as like being really good defensively, but like offensively is where we've needed to do better. Basically, once Christine Sinclair started to go on the decline, all of Canada in terms of scoring ability kind of
Mm-hmm.
started to go on the decline. And so that was my only worry. But I do think that it also comes down to like who are the players, like personnel. Like I think
Yeah.
sometimes too much falls on the coach, much blame, too much whatever falls on the coach, and sometimes it does have to do with personnel. And I think like Canada with Olivia Smith is in the best position, um, is in the best position it has been in a while. Like I think there was a big gap between when Christine Sinclair started to drop, and like who was going to be the one to take over. And I think,
Yeah,
and I think we were just, and I think like we won the Olympics, but, and I feel like Canadians are very, like, I get it. I feel like, they're prideful, right? But I feel like some Canadians are a little bit sensitive whenever people bring up the penalties. But like, it's true in the Olympics, we weren't scoring open play goals. We were relying on penalties like that. There's nothing, it still means our defense was great. So like our
I,
defense was great. I give that, but like we were not scoring open play goals.
I'm sorry,
And
Abby. I don't know what
so
tournament you watch. I saw great open play work from those gals. And look, I think the best thing coming from, unrelated but related, the best thing coming from the drones was like we spent all those years with drones just to park the bus and win the gold in Japan. Like, really? I did have to laugh. I was like, it hurts, but it is kind of funny. It is a kind of funny thing. But
maybe
your
the
point is,
drones helped us defend better.
we needed a drone to
The
park the
drones was
bus.
tough.
We needed a drone to park the bus. Really? We needed drone footage to do that. Send me. Like, I think for me, like, you do bring up the point where I think offense is going to be what is the hallmark of this next generation of teams. And I think we had a whole era of who is the next Sinclair, right? Which wasn't, I mean, and let's be very honest, 90% of that fell onto Jordan Heidema, and that was not fair to
Yeah.
her as a player, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to fill those shoes. That's basically that. It's not even the equivalent. That's saying, hey, league, who's going to be the next great player for your league? That no one's going to fill that properly. But I think Olivia,
And the
yeah,
game has
go.
changed.
It
I think like
has.
it's going to be even hard to find any player that can score at that level. And so I also think that's unfair to expect that like someone in this generation can produce at the same level. Like I just think it's going to be harder just because the quality is improving. But
It
yeah,
it
yeah,
is. It is though very interesting because I feel that when we look at this next generation of teams, right? These next 2 years, I have many hot takes with I don't know how many players from like that core will make it to the 27 World Cup.
I want us
And
to talk about that.
uh,
I want us to throw out some names because like keep going, but I wanted us to talk about that.
your eyes lit up way too fast. I'm like, I this is way too early. I've seen one game, and I had
True.
and the problem with me is like I'll have a tweet and I'm ready to send it, and then all of a sudden something happens. I'm like, giraffes, giraffes. But like I said, I talked about a little bit in my recap of the 1-1 draw, and to me, I think, and it was like I feel terrible saying this because this is I don't know if I will give you names, and by no means, and it's not that I don't think that they can play, but I think of the players who are coming, and it's like, and there are
Yeah.
players we don't even talk about that are still there, right? Every there's a stat, I forget who, I saw a video and they were like, if you take every youth or if you take every age group, if you can get 3 to 4 players from that age group contributing to your national team, you're good, all right? And so like I'm looking at, okay, the 2022 World Cup team for the women, right? Which they went there, they lost to France, lost to Korea, then lost to Nigeria. Um, I remember that team. I was like, oh, what happened? That team, Nikayla Small is injured. Don't sleep on Nikayla Smalls. I think there's a space for her if she continues to grow it. Good year. But like that team, from that team, you took Simia Wujo, you took Jade Rose, you took Olivia Smith. So you're like, oh, we actually got contributors from there. But that next U20 team, I am high on that group like we were on that 2014 U20 team when we hosted the U20s. I think there's enough, like Chukwu, Naya Rose, Olivia Smith, Florian Jord, like Ella Ati is a thing. I don't, the problem's gonna be with any youth player coming to the national team level, you're no longer competing with your peers. You're competing with everyone who is a professional at this point. So you don't have to just beat the top 40 or so collegiate players or people who are under 20. Now you have to beat out professionals. So it'll be tough for them. But I wonder, positionally wise, right? We've heard Casey Stoney say, okay, to me, Alidu is a 10. Okay. Alidu is a 10, that's fine. I think a lot will depend on where they put Olivia Smith. Because where they play Olivia Smith I think will create a ripple effect in the front line, because if they play her
Is it not obvious that she's a 9? Is that not obvious that she's a 9? Where do you think she should be?
I like her as a modern 10, right? Which is basically your second striker, right?
Okay.
Like there's no who's the 9?
Yeah. Who's she with? Viens?
I'll let I haven't given up on the idea of Evelyn Vienne as a 9. I think she could still be a solid 9. I think she pairs off better with. I think Vienne and Smith is a good pairing. There, you could almost do what they did. So, like when they played U20s, they effectively Olivia Smith and Florian Jordan were basically, you want to be 10? Cool. Do you want to be out wide? Cool. Like, let's swap it. And they were fluid that way. I think what you do at the 9 is interesting. I think having a more mobile 9 works if you're going to have a more back to the net, ball winning, hold up play 9. And that's where maybe you say a Jordan Heidema, you can still use her, because yes, she's not going to be Christine Sinclair, but she has improved her on the ball action. From deep, she is a good playmaker, and she's gone to her strengths, which is, look, I got hops. I'm going to get these headers. I'm going to do it. So I think if you do that to the 9, you have Heidema. If you want to say, I think Heidema, Vienne. And I am going to put Annabelle Chukwu there. I'm putting her there now because I think she'll get better. So you do that, then you go to the 10s. Ali Du's a 10. The coach has said it. I think Smith can be a 10. Cool. If you're going to play in like a similar to a 4-2-3-1, or if they play the 4-4-2 like they played against China, Jessie Fleming is probably going to be closer to a 10. That's 3 advanced midfielders type players.
Not the 8.
I don't. Emma Regan or Reagan. We're gonna say both ways because we'll find it eventually at TFC, AFC Toronto. But I think her emergence does something very interesting. You don't need to rely on Quinn as much.
Yeah,
and Simi is the CDM pairing that works best with Jessie Fleming. Which means to me, which is crazy if you asked me this 2 years ago, but like, I think a player like a Nichelle Prince, I think a player like even though she scored yesterday, a Julia Grosso, I don't know if there is space for them.
Grosso. Prince, I can see. Grosso, interesting.
And I'm still high on her as a player, but I don't know based off of the midfielders that are coming, because it's the CDMs. If they find CDM answers with their midfielders, then you put Grosso in a conversation where it's like, okay, now she's battling with 10s. And I'm not going to take Smith.
But it depends on the formation. What was the formation yesterday? I thought it was like
more of a 4-4-2. It was more of a 4-4-2.
You thought it was a 4-4-2?
It felt
okay.
I thought it was like a 4-4-2 diamond, where it was like a 4-1-2-1, but it wasn't, because Grosso was getting out wide with it. And again, you play any 11, they're going to move around. It's not going to be a strict stay in your channels lane. We know this, but I think in that the midfield is the most fascinating position to me because Fleming, I think, is a lock. I think Awujo is a lock. I think Reagan is a lock.
Just to make the team, not necessarily starting, but like to be on the squad.
To be on the squad, yeah.
You think Reagan? I feel very highly about Reagan. I'm very glad she's on AFC Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to see some more games. Actually, I was at the game in Toronto versus Mexico
Okay.
in the summer, and she did very well.
Yeah.
So like there's that, but then she was there and then she wasn't there. And then she played against China, which we need to see her against other competition. I know they were talking about that on One Soccer as well. Like,
Yeah.
let's see how she does against Mexico again. But another
Yeah.
team, I think it's very quick to say that, but I feel like Grosso is like a box to. Is she a box to box? She's not. She is more.
She's more of a
She's not good
10.
enough defensively. So she's
Mm-hmm.
definitely more of a 10. She hasn't been playing as that though. Like Bev, my issue with Bev was like this partnership with Grosso and Fleming. Like I just didn't like that. In the
Mm-hmm.
formation that it was being used, like I just didn't like. I feel like because Grosso wasn't as strong defensively, Jessie had to do a lot of that work, and so
Yeah.
then she wasn't really helping offensively, which is what
Yeah.
Canada needed. We needed like that creative player who could
Mm-hmm.
set people up, and Jessie was working too hard to do the other end. But I felt like Grosso and Reagan really worked well. Yeah, like, and you saw the drop. You saw the drop off. To be fair, Casey Sony brought in some kids after.
Look,
But
we got to see players who weren't in the top 25. Like I'm excited.
yeah,
I'm thrilled.
yeah, no, for sure. But I feel like it worked yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm not 100% convinced she's out of the mix.
And again, that's fair. I'm not saying she's out of the mix. I'm just saying, at least for my depth chart, now again, we have a new coach, so everyone starts at a level playing field. So,
Yeah,
but the emergence of more central defensive and responsible midfielders means the players that you were playing in those positions can now play further up the pitch. And so Fleming is no longer in that sixth role. She's in that 8 to 10. Now she's probably your best 8 on the team.
yeah.
But now you put her up the pitch. Are you going to play Grosso over Fleming? No. Then the conversation becomes, is she an 8 or a 10? Once you get to the 10 conversation, I'm taking Smith. I'm taking Ali Du. I'm and so to me it's like, okay, if I have a of a depth chart, it's not necessarily that I don't think the player is good, but and this is my depth chart. This is not the Canada Soccer official depth chart, so I don't make the teams. And if they want to make me make the teams, I'm available on Tuesdays and on holidays. But like we can kind of see that kind of go through. But I think it's very interesting. The only other fascinating position to me is just right back because
Right back.
and it's availability. It's the biggest thing. If
Yeah.
Jade can have a healthy year, no one is denying the talent. Riviere.
She's the best right back we have. Her issue is availability.
It is.
100%.
And her lack of availability has made that position more wide open because when Sydney Collins came in, it was just like, oh, okay, this is curious. We can bring
Mhm.
in Gabby. And when she got hurt, Gabby was manning it anyways. So you have those two, and then you come in Jade. It's a great problem to have, honestly. Yeah, you have too many right backs, know what to do with. Okay,
There's
cool.
Ashley even. There's Ashley who played yesterday. I
Yeah,
think
but I
she was
mean,
in the left. Was she in the left or on the right? She
Ashley
switched
was
in
on
the
the
second
left.
half, actually.
She
Yeah.
switched in the second half, but Ashley's a left, and
Yeah.
like that comes down to like, who do you want to be your next left back? Okay, cool. That's a fun conversation.
But that's also where formation matters because after the World Cup, Bev switched to three back, and then Ashley
Yes,
was playing in the wing back position. And so I thought that was interesting that in Casey Stoney's first game with Canada, she did a four back because it was the first time in a while we've seen Ashley in that right back position
true. But
or
then
left
injuries.
back position.
Kadisha's still injured. Jade Rose isn't back. We only had two
That's
center
true.
backs that would play. If they're all healthy, I think they're in
Well,
a
we
back
did a
three.
three back in the last window
But
without Buchanan. It was like Zadorsky, Gilles,
and
and
Jade,
who? Jade, yeah.
yeah, it was Jade Rose,
Yeah.
but Jade's now injured. Yeah, so
Oh, she, oh,
yeah,
the Rose. Yeah, Rose. Yeah.
yeah.
I
So
see what
like,
you're saying. I see what you're saying. We have too
mhm,
many injuries. I see what you're saying.
yeah. So even if we get back to the back three, are you playing a midfield duo? Are you play? And I think that to me is where I keep going back to. You're probably playing a midfield duo because you're playing with more center backs. You the you leave. I don't think they're going to play with a three midfield. If you're not going to play with a three midfield, you need one solid defensive one and one 10. And if that's the case, who gets left out? I think that's I wonder how many of those regulars don't make it, and we won't be surprised. And the other thing is, again, the kids are coming. The kids are like the kids are here, and like they're
No,
going to push.
I think it's healthy competition. It's
Yeah.
needed. The only thing I think with the 10 is that Olivia Smith, I mean, we need to see this team. We need to see more games. But I
Yes.
think like
Agreed.
Olivia Smith for me is the one person that I feel most confident in getting a goal. And then like Adriana Leon, probably I would still put her as second for now. But like Olivia Smith, and so I hesitate to not just put her up front. And
And
so if she's up
mhm,
front, that does it. Aladu's not going to play the 10 every single game, every single minute.
no,
And so in
yeah,
that sense, I do still think there's a space for Grosso, although like Haitama also played the 10 last year at times. And so I also think the wing, you said right back. I was wondering if you're gonna say right wing. Because I was wondering where you're going with that, because I feel like Janine Sonis, aka Becky,
yeah. We're
I
gonna call her Becky
feel
for a month.
like
It's okay.
like I think Becky, I think Prince, I think Deanne Rose. I think these are players where it's like nostalgia. Like I get it, but production wise, it's not good enough. They're not
And
consistent enough. I will say Janine. Okay, she's coming off the ACL, but even pre ACL, it was.
I will say this: the thing that we didn't talk about the most with this team was those regular names weren't getting regular minutes last year.
You mean club wise?
Yeah, club wise, and I think that's where it opens the door for the conversation of if that continues, right? The shell is in KC. The the amount of talent in KC is like what is like I have a Nigerian joke where I say Nigeria has more strikers than some teams countries have quality players. They don't know what to do with them. And
Mm-hmm.
so where's Nichelle going to get her minutes, right? Has Jesse Fleming, have Portland and Jesse figured that out where now she can get minutes on a consistent level, right? Grosso, is she going to be able to thrive and be the player that we think that she can be there? Adrienne Leon in West Ham, like, is she going to
Yeah.
be a contributor? The names that have been synonymous with this program the last couple of years are the names that they're in high profile places, but they aren't getting high profile showcases. And with that, now you create the lack of form. And like, will we reach a point where we have to have a tough conversation where it's, and I'm a big proponent of you don't, and especially this year because there aren't competitive games, you don't need to call everyone all the time. You can give them a window off. Give them a window off and see someone else, please. Like, and it's nothing
Yeah.
personal. Like,
This is
I
the
don't think
year.
there's the only player that we ever heard do it was Janine. And like there was half the people were like, what happened? And Janine was just like, look, we talked to the coach, we planned this, I'm taking a break. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with giving players a break and just saying, hey, I want to take a look at the nines or the wingers. So go to Cabo, take the time. We'll talk next window. I think there's
We saw
enough,
Emma Hayes. Emma Hayes did that actually for the
and there's
US.
nothing wrong
And
with that.
she came. She sat out some like I think Alex Morgan, like there's these big name players that she didn't
Mhm.
call for the first camp, and it was all this drama. But it worked out because there is a little bit of pressure if you call those people that you got to play them. And
Mhm.
so, and if you really want to see some younger players, just don't even call them. Give them a break. I mean, I don't know. I think with Stoney being a new coach, she probably wants to see everyone. She needs to see
Yeah.
everyone. She probably doesn't feel like she can afford to sit people yet.
Mhm.
But yeah, I have a question. Like, what do you feel? Because I feel like with these Canadian players, if it's not the NWSL, then they're trying to force to play with these like high profile teams that don't really always give them the minutes. And if that doesn't work, then they just choose to come back to the NWSL. And I've always wondered, like, I didn't mind how Deanne Rose has kind of always been like Reading, Leicester, these lower, like she just has injuries. That's the reason she hasn't been
Mhm.
playing. But like I feel like more of our players, if they really want to do Europe, I feel like they should be considering those teams so that they can keep playing than only choosing these top teams. Like I'm thinking Chloe Lacasse, like it was going good for her in Portugal. I understand the level, but she was getting Champions League. She was scoring on Barcelona. Like she was looking good.
Mhm.
And then she picked Arsenal as a team to go to, and suddenly she wasn't getting any minutes. She lasted a year and now she's in the NWSL.
Yeah.
Jessie Fleming wasn't getting a lot of minutes last year. She had to make the move. There's been other Janine Becky wasn't getting a lot of minutes towards the end of her Man City
Yeah, but
career. And like, oh, I'm just
that's Man City. We don't know what they're doing there.
no, but it's a pattern with these Canadians and Ashley Lawrence. Ashley Lawrence has not been getting as many minutes.
I don't disagree with the sentiment that you're saying. And to that, my response is this. I think and this is a universal football thing. Sometimes it's not the profile of the club, it's the opportunity to develop, right? And like you said, look, you always want to push. Now, again, old regime was very much banging the drum on we want top tier leagues that you want to be playing in. If you're not playing in a top tier league, you're not going to call you up. That's why Gabby Carl left what was it, Denmark, and then
Yeah.
came back to the NWSL.
Yeah, Sweden, yeah. And
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
Nordic country.
Yeah,
I
there's other
apologize.
issues with yeah, I know.
Someone's gonna be like, she played in. I'm like, I'm sorry, but
No,
like,
no.
so I think there was a point to that. Like, even when we talk about young players who get transfers, it's like go to the right spot, not necessarily the high profile spot. And I think you can do that. The problem is, and I've always had this conversation with Europe. It's like the league is built. Most leagues are built to develop the game in their country. So some people will say we're trying to develop specific players. So it's not beholden to them to say, even though we have this player who could help us,
Yeah.
well, I'm gonna take the local kid versus the international star who's gonna do X, Y, and Z. Now, when they come over here, they have more minutes, they have more opportunities. I understand that aspect, but I think there is a middle tier that like you said, that they could get to where I think they could guarantee themselves the minutes. But then that comes the conversation is, as a player, are you good with that? Or do you want to push
Yeah.
yourself a little bit further, right? We haven't reached the point where oil money has infiltrated into the women's game yet, where it's just like, okay, well, are they going to play? Like they're gonna do it. Saudi Arabia is gonna do it at some point. They're gonna be like, hey, one of these and NWSL players, here's a $20 million to come play in our league. And then the
It
question
will
is going to
happen,
be,
yeah.
is it worth doing it or is it not? I think players will always pick things for whatever reason that works for them, right? When Jordan came back, she wanted to be on the West Coast. That worked. And she got to play with still a solid side. Same thing. I like if we look at the players who came back, I wish players had stayed a little bit longer? Yes. I think I would have wished that, but that also comes from where we are and how we see the sport, right? In a lot of our definition of the sport is based off of the men's leagues and how those are built. Europe is the promised land for any footballer that's out there. In the women's game, that's not necessarily the case, right? the NWSL, and especially because of the money that's starting to flow into it, right? The NWSL basically had their Premier League 1993 year last year, where the new TV deal came, they got the money, and then all of a sudden it was just like everyone, when the flavor du jour was Zambians, like all of them, Copper Queens, bring them, Copa Queens. And it was just like, wow, okay, good for you. But I think, and they found an opportunity, that league suits that style of play. There's so many factors in terms of what builds them, right? In the same way that I think Portugal is like Portugal on the women's side, to me, is the equivalent to how some of the men's leagues look at, say, like Belgium, right? That league where it's like it's a great league, you develop, you get sold, you move on from there, and then you're good. So I think opportunity, fit, lifestyle matters. Do you want to live in Italy? Some of us do. Some people don't. Julia Grosso made that decision. She moved to Chicago. Good for her. So I think it's tough because we're also, the women's game isn't necessarily as defined as the men's game. So what is considered success isn't necessarily that same thing. I mean, even look at on the men's side. Atiba Hutchinson spent how many years in Turkey?
Turkey.
And he's loved there. That's fine. So I think there is, but I do think that maybe sometimes, look, if a team wants to buy you, you have to sign off on it. That's fair. Can they get to a spot? I think it's always that next move that matters. Do I think Chloe could have still performed in Europe? Yes. Maybe not at Arsenal, but maybe if she went down to like a mid-table team in the W, I think she could have been successful there. But she chose to come back and was playing well until the ACL.
Yeah.
And so we kind of have to wait. But I think every player, it's a different situation. But we kind of have to look at it from a more of an open mindset with the women's side, because nothing is as, say, concrete as how we look at the men's side and how that sport looks there. So I'm curious. I'm wondering. We'll wait and we'll see. Before you wrap up here, because I'm sure you don't want to go a full 2 hours here, and you know there's probably solid food for you waiting. This year, what would you consider a success for women's football for 2025 here in Canada? What would you, for you, what is a successful year? You look back, it's December. We probably have a conversation in December and say, did all these things happen? What to you is success for this end of the year?
I feel like for me, the focus is entirely on the NSL. Like, actually, no, that's not true. I'll say in the Canadian national team. I say for the national team, identifying and incorporating more of these younger players. It just was not happening with Bev Griezmann at all. I shouldn't even just say the younger players, just any players. Like I'll include Aludou in there and Reagan, like players that should have been getting minutes and weren't. I think that for me will be a success if Casey Stoney is open and she allows these players to come and get minutes. Like you said, we're not competing for trophies this year, so there's no reason to be stingy and just play the players we already know how they can do. So if that can happen at the end of the year, if we can look back at the stats and see there were good minutes given to some players we haven't seen previously, I consider that a success, regardless of if we're drawing against teams we should be beating or losing. I don't actually care this year. NSL wise, look, it's the first year, it's inaugural. I just hope I would say a success will be decent turnout. Like it doesn't need to be sold out. I think some of the stadiums are too big for it to likely even be sold out, but just consistent turnout week after week. Good football, played well. I think some recognition internationally, like get a little bit of these media outlets talking about it as well. I think like Attacking Third, like I think like the American ones in particular, they could talk about it, get it recognized. Everyone's healthy. Finish the season healthy, no more ACLs. That is a successful and AFC Toronto wins the inaugural season. That's the successful year.
Just sliding it in like, and a trophy, please. A trophy. Just one, please. I beg a trophy, please. I think for me, if I sum it up in a word, it's identity, right?
Like
The
that.
league NSL, be who you're gonna be, right? Have us be able to look at it and say, okay, this is this type of a league. Whether it's it's an athletic league, it's a team where every team has a specific style, and they're kind of going, or it's just it's just swashbuckling football, or it's just highway football. However you want to play it, give it an identity. National team wise, again, have that. You are almost seeing the influences of both coaches on both of their programs from the national team as well as their youth teams. And you're seeing, I wonder how that trickles down through the entirety of it. And then identity also in terms of identifying just who we want to be as a soccer nation, as a football nation, and making strides to do that. Seeing the areas where we fall short and not being afraid to address them, and seeing the places that we are succeeding and continue to build on them. Um, identity and identifying to me is what 2025 is going to be about. Um, and so for me, that's how I'm going to look at it. And that's the exciting part for me. And unrelated, I need us to beat America in everything, because reasons. If you don't know, well, good for you. You live under a rock. I appreciate you.
100%.
But
100%.
but with that, guys, this will wrap up our time here. If you haven't already, you see the logo, Woso North, guys. If you haven't followed that, please do. It is one of my favorite watches to do 3 minutes before a podcast. I'm sorry. I mean, every time that I watch you before. Believe me.
Hilarious. No.
Just throwing that in, just like I was prepared, I promise. No, so honestly, one of the better Canadian contents for women's soccer here on YouTube, guys. So make sure you give her a subscribe, give her a like. I won't threaten you because I don't really have that much authority. I'm on YouTube, so it doesn't really mean much. But make sure you do that. Make sure you follow us there. This is going to come out before the end of February, but do you have anything that's coming up on your channel that you want to let the people know about so
For
they
the
can
end of
go there
March. For the
before
end
the
of
end of
March.
March?
For the end of February. February.
Before the end of March. Look, I'm a quick turnaround. Okay, I'm gonna get this done.
It's a long day. It's long.
But do you have any content that's coming up that we should keep our eyes out open for?
I'm just working on a video comparing the recent moves from abroad to NWSL versus NWSL to abroad. So there's been a lot of talk after Gurma and Niswanger, Tarsiani, Caroline leaving NWSL to go to Europe. And so I want to actually do a little bit of comparison. So I'm going to be working on that. But thank you so much for having me. Seen you online. You messaged at a perfect time because I was like, I need to do a collab with this person. And so I'm so glad that you reached out. Definitely need to do it again.
Oh, be still my heart. I appreciate it. I love having these conversations, and we're gonna probably do some more as well. But yes, thank you for spending the time. Thank you for being my guest, and putting up with my random ADHD mind. I do appreciate that. But until next time, guys, thank you for being here. And as always, I just will tell you, bye bye for now.